African Americans should not be scrutinized too much
Okay.
because they have a unique history. I don't think any group of people have experienced that much cruelty, as far as I know. That much, being just degradation, being stripped of their culture.
Right.
So unfortunately, a lot of African Americans struggle with identity, who they are. So, and they might even feel abandoned, right? Because they think they were sold by the Africans, and though they were sold by the Arabs. And so,
They were not sold by the Africans, they were sold by the Arabs.
the Arabs, yeah, the Arabs had a 1,000-year slave trade before the Europeans. They were transporting Africans all over the world.
Okay, so people who accuse Africans of selling their own people to the slave trade, that's wrong.
That's
The Africans did not sell them, the Arabs sold them.
This is very interesting. I often hear African Americans and other people of African heritage saying that they don't care about Africa and Africans because Africans sold them into slavery. At first, I thought, why would they say that? That is so strange and wrong. I completed my high school in the USA, and I took U.S. history, and I always got an A plus in that class. And the U.S. history books never mentioned that Africans sold their brothers and sisters into slavery. I never read that once. So I was like, where are these people getting this information from? I was told that the white men snatched the Africans from Africa against their will. Yes, I'm sure that there were some business-minded bad Africans who helped to make the white man's job easy by working with them to snatch other Africans, and they got paid through alcohol and a few coins. I'm almost certain that if some of those Africans didn't assist the European slave traders in their evil deeds, the European slave traders would have forced the Africans to do the job. They would have forced them to snatch other Africans, whether they wanted to or not. I don't believe most Africans willingly participated in the slave trade. They were forced to participate against their will. They had no choice. Just like you, if there's a man holding a gun to your head, telling you to do something, you will do it, whether you want to or not. You will do it against your will because you want to live. You don't want to be killed, right? So I believe the same happened to most of these Africans, like the ones who participated in the slave trade. They were forced and made to do it. And if they did it or not, the European slave traders would have done it on their own by force by using the Africans. I don't think it was a choice on the most part. I don't believe most Africans sold their brothers and sisters into slavery. Just for example, how do you think the Europeans managed to colonize African countries? The Africans didn't just willingly give up their countries to be ruled by the Europeans. The Europeans took those countries by force. The man with the gun has all the powers, and the man with the gun always wins. So I think people of African heritage who want to blame slavery on their African brothers and sisters need to stop doing that. It's counterproductive. I think the ones who blame Africans for slavery do so as a bad excuse to disassociate themselves from Africa. So they pretend to be angry at Africans and Africa for quote unquote selling them into slavery, because then that makes them feel like they have the right to not love Africa, that they have the right to hate Africa. They want to find a reason to hate Africa, so they try to use that slavery excuse as their reason for not wanting to associate with Africa, which is bogus. But I'm glad that not all people of African heritage believe that Africans sold them into slavery. I'm glad that those people are pointing fingers at the Europeans, and maybe the Arabs, as I'm hearing right now. So Africans did not willingly sell their brothers and sisters into slavery. They were made to do it.
But again, do your own research.
Do your own
I
research.
could be wrong.
You're right.
Yeah, Africans still have. That's the thing too. Like Africans, there's still slavery going on in Africa right now.
Okay.
Human trafficking has a huge. It's huge in our economy.
Right.
In the black market. So we're all guilty of slavery. In fact, slavery was normal a few hundred years ago.
Right.
There was indentured servitude, where if you paid a debt and you owed somebody,
Right.
then you pay your time as a slave. But the African Americans, they experienced the worst slavery.
Oh my goodness. And I'm so glad you brought that up about African Americans, because I always thought when people say, oh, African Americans suffer the worst because of slavery, and I always compare to them to Namibia and South Africa, because we had a form of slavery we had segregation called Apartheid, which was very brutal, right?
What's the difference between apartheid and segregation?
I think it's one and the same. They were both brutal, Black people in Africa suffered, like Namibia and South Africa was suffered through apartheid, and the Black Americans suffered through slavery, right? Maybe a good point. Apartheid did not strip us for our culture, right? They were both really, really bad. That Black Americans suffered more because they were stripped of their culture, like you said, their identity. Because once you take somebody's culture and take it away from them, you're pretty much left with nothing, right?
Even their own self-image. So their identity is given to them. It's not a choice.
One of my subscribers made this comment on another video, but it relates really well to this topic. Here is what they wrote. Well, it's a more complex issue. Caribbeans and Afro-Latinos had more Africans going into their countries during slavery. So by the time that the 1808 slave trade was banned, they still had actual Africans in Jamaica, Trinidad, etc. Also, places like Cuba and Brazil didn't stop bringing in new Africans from Africa until the 1860s, and they didn't abolish slavery until the late 1880s. In America, the USA, the whites made a point to sell the African babies away from their mothers so that they didn't retain any African culture. And because the slave trade was legally banned in 1808, they started to create more slaves with breeding farms, which forced young women to have 15 or more children. They also separated people from the same tribes so that they couldn't communicate with each other. Also, unlike other countries where the slaves were taken, in the USA, we had a very large white population. So the culture of the country was not going to be African driven. Our white presidents aren't going to have heritage days focused on our African roots. Black Americans are a larger mix of African tribes than Caribbeans. We had Africans going directly to the USA, but they also brought in slaves from the Caribbeans to the USA. So this idea that African Americans are supposed to know where we come from is less likely, even with a DNA. Of course, most of us know we come from Africa, but most of us do not grow up in African cultures. And unlike the Caribbeans, our culture is not heavily based on African foods, dances, and spirituality. because most of us have no idea what our tribal mixes are and haven't retained those practices in the last 200 plus years. Plus, the USA was too cold and not tropical enough to grow most Afrocentric foods. Louisiana was one of the few states that grew sugarcane. We had more generational slaves in the Americas than other groups of Africans. An African American is likely to be a descendant of a family enslaved for 6 generations, while a Caribbean or Latinos may only have been enslaved for 3 or 4 generations.
First of all, America created Black history, right? And so they teach Black history, but where does it start? It doesn't start from Africa. It starts from the slave ship.
Interesting.
So all the African American heroes are civil rights leaders, slaves. What about before slaves? Who are the heroes to look up to before? So even the highest level of pride they can have, the highest person they can look up to is a slave. Harriet Tubman, you know what I mean? All the freedom fighters.
Right.
So it's like that's your role model.
It's a role model.
Former slave.
Right.
Not somebody like Mansa Musa,
Right.
Haile Selassie,
Right.
Tedros, Menelik, kings, people
Right.
who are elevated past slavery.
Right.
So it's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate history starts from when they left Africa. But that's not when the identity starts. The identity starts from Africa when they're actually in Africa.
That's a fault of the American school system. Their history starts 300 years or 500 years ago.
Right. So do you think Black History Month should exist?
Yes, it should. It should exist, but it shouldn't start with slavery.
Okay, it should start with Africa.
Yeah.
Up to us to educate our people in America about their history before they carry on this ship.
Yes.
Interesting.
Why should they be? Why should their point of pride be their lowest point of their history?
Yeah, that's true. Say that again.
Why should their highest achievements be freeing themselves from slavery?
So if you watch this and you're African American, you can become an African citizen in Ghana, no questions asked. So you can get up right now and go to Ghana and get your citizenship and become an African, true African that you were before you were sold to slavery.
Correction, not just African Americans, but all descendants of the African slave trade can become Ghanaians.
What do you think about that? Is that a good move?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially because, but here's the most ironic thing is, even with everything you said about African Americans, they're also the most privileged.
That's true.
They're the richest. They're the most economically positioned to actually make a difference.
That's true.
So it's a great way to actually change the course of our history by African Americans. It can be a full circle
Right.
by bringing their resources. African Americans are very educated, very
Right.
intelligent, very rich
Right.
compared to other Africans.
That's true. They're the richest Black people in the world, but that's definitely a good move, and I hope that more African countries do that for our African American brothers and sisters.
Hey guys, that's the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful, and of course don't forget to leave your comment below, like and share. All right, to all my people of African heritage, please let's embrace our Africanness. Africa is beautiful. You are beautiful. To my non-African heritage people, you are loved. You are welcome here anytime. And of course, I love you guys. Thank you for support, and God bless.